So we're going to begin where we left off from the last time, talking about starlight and distances. Well, there we go. All right. Let me see if I can minimize that. Perfect. Right. So first, we're going to talk about light. Now, light is a very unusual object. In some cases, it acts as a particle. In other cases, it acts as a wave. And a particle is what we think of when we think of matter in general, like air, water, dirt. All those are particles. A wave is what you think of a wave. Sound waves, for example, is a different wave. Otherwise, the ocean waves and stuff like that, just a movement of energy of sorts. Light acts a little bit of both. And I'm sorry for those here that cannot see my screen, but there's something called a Young's slit light experiment, where you can take a source of light, shine it through a metal sheet with two slits in it, and it gives this wave pattern, as you can see on the screen there. For those here, I'm sorry, you'll just have to potentially watch. Maybe if you actually go look at Micah's computer, maybe you can see what I'm seeing here. I'm not sure, but it's pretty cool looking for those that can see online. But it shows how unusual light is. The more we learn about it, the more questions we have. And now, as far as the speed of light, it gets even wonkier. So normally, if a person is in a car and they throw a ball the same direction as the car, the speed of that ball is the speed of the car plus the speed of the throw. Light is a little different. Depending on the model of physics that you're using, say you have a spaceship that's going near the speed of light, just shy of it, and it fires a laser. That laser is not going to be going near twice the speed of light. In fact, compared to the ship, it's only going to be going a few kilometers or miles per second faster. It's very unusual. And this, of course, is assuming a one-way speed of light, which we cannot measure. The only way we have the speed of light is by the round trip speed of light. So on the right side of the screen there, all the speeds of light from the Earth to the moon, sun to the moon, or sun to the Earth, and etc., is all estimates based upon the round trip speed. What we're going to here is a little talk about the secular of things to play into this. Now, things 13.5 billion light years away, meaning we can see a distance of 13.5 billion light years. And a light year is the distance that light can travel in a single year. Now, according to the secular theory, evolutionary theory, the Earth, or not Earth, but the universe is only 13.7 billion years old, meaning that according to their theory, we can see 2 million years after the Big Bang. And there aren't that many things that are close to us as far as light years go. 2 million light years is the closest galaxy, and that is relatively close, universally speaking. Now, the secular theory, we've already went over some of their problems, the horizon problem, the distance galaxies looking old, but we're going to look at this from a biblical worldview, because according to the Bible, the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Stars were created on day 4, and based upon the purpose given of the stars, their light should be visible from Earth by day 6 at least, but more likely on day 4. And this has led to a problem, because if things are 13.7 billion light years away, meaning that it should take 13.7 or 13.5 billion light years away, 13.5 billion light year or billion years for that us a speed of light is what we think it is. Round trip speed of light is the one-way speed of light. And this has even led certain apologetics, certain Christians, to doubt the Bible and go to an old earth creation view. As you can see there on the screen, some quotes. It's a problem for them from accepting a full biblical worldview. And so this is some of the things that we went over. So how do we find a solution to this problem? Now, one note here as far as Einstein physics. So according to Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not a constant, but the speed of light is. We'll deal with that in a little bit. So that means that we have to figure out a solution to this. Some propose solutions that unfortunately cannot work, or some people think the distances are not real. We can be very, very confident that we are truly seeing at least close to 13.5 billion light years away. Some try to say that the much, much faster in the past. And that that just doesn't fit with the math. And so we can't really put much evidence behind that. And some say that the light was created in transit, meaning that when God created everything, he created the light in between the 2 points. And we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but it just doesn't work. And unfortunately, the biggest problem we have is that God doesn't tell us much about this. All the Bible tells us is that he created the stars also. So we don't really have a lot to go on based upon what the Bible tells us. So one of the proposed solutions for this is the mature creation, or light being created in transit. And on the surface, this looks pretty good. I mean, Adam was created full grown with the appearance of age. Trees were created full grown to fulfill their function. Again, the appearance of age. So perhaps God created light with the appearance of age, meaning that he created light in between 2 points. So the light never actually came from the star. It just appears that it did. Now, this is rejected by many creationist scientists today because starlight contains a lot of details. In fact, most of what we know about the universe comes from starlight. For example, in 1987, there was a supernova. And this supernova, which we know there's many of them, this one was 168,000 light years away. Meaning, from a biblical worldview, assuming the constant speed of light of 300,000 kilometers per second, this light could not reach the earth in 6,000 years. So if you believe in a mature creation, a light in transit creation, that means that star never actually existed. It was just an image of light that gave us the impression of a star that then changed to look like a star exploded. And so that star never actually existed. You can see some of the problems with this because that means much, if not most, of the universe doesn't actually need to exist. That means that all the things coming towards, all the light coming towards us are just beams of light. They're not coming from anything. And it removes us from reality because we don't know which of these stars are truly close enough to be real and which of them are far enough away to not be real. And then what else? What else is not really there? What else is just light coming at us? The sun, the planets. So it raises a number of questions. And it raises even questions about the nature of God, because this looks like deception. Now, some people will say it's not deception if God told us, but he doesn't really tell us that there are just lights up there. He says that he created the stars also. And even the sun itself, to get the light out of the sun, it takes thousands of years based upon our understanding of how the sun works, and then 8 minutes to get to the earth. So that means the sun was producing light in transit, and so we don't even know if the sun's really there. And so it creates a lot of problems, and so that's why it's mainly rejected today. The next one that used to be very popular, especially in the 80s, is called a white hole. Now, a white hole is very similar to a black hole, except it's the complete reverse. So a black hole is a high concentration of matter and energy, so much so that it just basically sucks everything in. And the same math that proved, or that postulated black holes, which was then shown to be accurate based upon our evidences here in the last few decades, the same math that showed that also allows for white holes, though we have never seen one. Now, a white hole has all that matter in there, but instead of sucking everything in, it shoots everything out. And then after everything's gone, it disappears. So this theory holds that God created everything day 1 through 3 inside the singularity point of a white hole. And then as he stretched everything out, everything passed the event horizon. And according to Einstein's theory of general relativity, that means time was basically altered there. So for the wider universe, as it passed the event horizon, time seems to be going very, very fast. But on Earth, only the day has passed. So millions, billions of years are passing in the outside universe. A day is passing on Earth. Now, this would explain how galaxies seem to be crashing into each other, but it also has a number of problems. It uses the old universe cosmology that we went over in the last lecture. A lot of problems with that. The math also has some problems, and it doesn't match very well to a lot of what we're seeing experimentally, like the red shifts and the blue shifts don't really match with what we're seeing with this. So it has some promise, but it does have a lot of problems. So now we're going to go back to the one-way speed of light. So in miles, that's 186,000 miles per second or so for the round trip speed of light. And we have done this experimentally with reflectors on the moon and lasers. But this is an average velocity. This isn't a constant speed there and a constant speed back. This is just the speed to get from point A to point B back to point A. And this creates what we call a circular problem, meaning that to get this speed of one-way speed of light travel, we have to make some assumptions, meaning we have to assume the speed. And whenever we assume that within a certain range, that can be accurate. So it's not a one answer kind of problem. It's a decent large area of things that fit the solution. And so whenever we have this kind of circular problem where the answer is the question itself, that usually means that this isn't a measure of nature that we're measuring, that we're trying to get an answer to, but actually is a convention of man that we're placing upon nature. And so we cannot calculate or measure the one-way speed of light. Then how can this be a problem for a biblical worldview? How can it be a problem that light got here in 6,000 years or even a single day when we don't know how fast the one-way speed of light is? So it can't really be a problem since we don't really know what that is. Now, if you think, wait, I can figure out how to get the one-way speed of light. You can use radio. Well, unfortunately, you can't use radio to synchronize the clocks at these two locations because radio moves at the speed of light. You can try to synchronize the clocks like Mission Impossible or some of those heist movies. Synchronize your watches and go. But movement does affect the speed of time. So that doesn't really work. But maybe you can try to calibrate or compensate those with certain formulas, certain equations. But those equations have to have the speed of light in them. So if you can figure out a way to get a one-way speed of light, please tell me. We'll work together and we'll make a lot of money on it. So let me know. But basically, it's impossible with our current understanding of how to figure this out. In fact, they've been working on this for the last 100 years and haven't got a good solution. So now we're going to delve a little bit deeper in something called the anisotropic synchrony convention. So this is based upon a different convention of physics. Normally what we think of when we think of Einstein's theory of relativity is velocity-based physics. Now, Einstein did postulate a position-based physics, which he didn't really delve into, and a few people have recently, but for the most part, our society has been focused on velocity-based physics, meaning that the faster we go towards the speed of light, the slower time seems to flow for us. So if you go the speed of light, if you are traveling 300,000 kilometers per second, assuming speed of light is a constant, that means that time for you will not be existing. You will have an instantaneous trip. Position-based physics means that light is moving towards you instantaneously. So whenever light is shown at you, it is moving towards you from your perspective instantaneously. That sounds very weird. I understand, but physics is weird. So I'm sorry for that. John Winey, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce his name, did some work with this in the 1970s, and other people have done some work with this. So basically, there's a lot to be built up with this, but it has a lot of interesting things if you have interest in physics. So that means for the biblical model that when stars were made, day 4, their light hit the earth instantaneously. So we can assume a number of speeds for the speed of light, even instantaneously one direction. And then when it's bounced back, it's basically half the speed of that. So averaging, it would give us the 300,000 kilometers per second. Now, while this does fit all the math, all the evidence that we have, it by no means proves it. There's no way that we can prove this with our current understanding, but this is still a young model. So if you want to try to use this, it definitely has a lot of promise and is one of the better models out there for this solution. But it's very difficult to explain, as I'm sure you are experiencing right now. And since it cannot be proven, a lot of people don't like it. People in general, especially when trying to convince them of something, want something that is proven, tested, confirmed. And so it may be great to try and convince somebody. It may not be, just depending on the person. Now, the other common solution is something called the dasha solution. Dasha is the Hebrew word for sprout. And this is basically saying that during the creation week, some things are created ex nihilo, basically out of nothing. While other things, like man, for example, was created from something that was already created. We were created from the dust. Now, the plants, when they were brought forth, it says, let the earth bring forth plants. And this is an active and a dynamic term. And it almost seems to give the impression of like a time-lapse photo or a video. So time isn't moving faster, but God miraculously is making it seem like it is. The plants are doing something that normally would take years and years inside a 24-hour period. The same could occur for the stars. This is a miraculous solution, meaning that light wasn't created in transit. Light did come from these bodies, but it just took a much faster time or much slower time to get quicker to get here than what it would otherwise be. So basically, this is a miraculous solution because everything else that happened during creation week was miraculous. Why wouldn't this be? Now, this is spearheaded by Danny Faulkner, and it does have a lot of good things going for it. It answers all the questions we have, but it does leave a few questions. And that's mainly because this can't be proven scientifically. Just like a virgin birth or the resurrection or water into wine, when we try to use natural ways of understanding how these things occurred, we're going to come up short. Now, we can see the effects of this miraculous event. We can see wine being digested if you drink it. We can see the body that has risen from resurrection. We can see the baby from a virgin birth. Now, maybe we can find some connection with that. But for now, we don't. We don't have any way of proving this scientifically or even supporting this scientifically. This is a purely miraculous thing. And since science is the study of nature, we're coming up short. Now, because of that, a lot of people don't like this, mainly secular scientists, because it's basically like saying God did it. And for many of us that have talked with people or looking at these discussions, looking at these debates in the last few decades, that is something that evolutionary theorists, evolutionary supporters throw at Christians as an insult, saying that it's a God of the gaps. God is only used to explain what we can't understand. And so because of that ridicule, many people may not like to use this, but that does not mean that this is a bad model. It just means that God works in miraculous ways, and this may be one of the ways that he did this. So there's a lot of ways that we can answer these questions, but for a summary of this entire lesson, we went over last time how the sun was unique even among similar stars, and that how it couldn't allow for Earth to have life for billions of years if the sun is truly that old. So it points to a young sun. The stars, we don't see any stars forming. We see fast aging and many supernovae, many explosions of stars. The moon can be old based upon its current movement, and the impact rate matches a young Earth and even fits very well with the biblical model of the flood. Planets, their magnetic fields, their heat, their rings all point to a relatively young age, as well as the galaxies. And we already just went over the starlight travel distances and speeds today. So if you have any questions as far as the starlight travel speeds or any of those problems or theories or solutions, please let me know. It's very in-depth, but we have a lot of good solutions with that. It's a little deep getting into the physics. So for resources, here are some resources on light. Jason Lyles, I think is how you pronounce his name. He does a lot of good work with that. For more information on Einstein's relativity, there's that if you want to read into that more. And then it's just some things on space. Again, Jason Lyles, and then Danny Faulkner do a lot of good work with that. And I'm sure you can even ask Dan Allball for some pictures. He has a lot of experience with everything, stars and whatnot as well. So next, we're going to be going over, if I can transfer over. Let me see if I can get this. There we go. All right. Alt tab. Right. Then share. All right. So I'm hoping everybody can see this. Micah, tell me if they can't, but we'll go on to the next lesson talking about the origin of life. There we go. So in Genesis 1, 20 through 25, we're going to go over day 5 and a little bit of day 6. So God said, let the waters teem with living creatures and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the sky. So God created the great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters teemed according to their kinds. And every bird of flight and after its kind, and God saw that it was good. Then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters of the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the 5th day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, land crawlers, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that crawls upon the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So we're going to be talking about how life formed. We know that God spoke it into existence, but the secular model holds to something called abiogenesis. That means life from non-life, basically. This first came about in the 1800s when the understanding of a simple cell was easy to believe because we just didn't know its complexity. Now we know that the cell is extremely complex. At the same time, there was something called spontaneous generation that was a commonly held idea. That was that basically, whenever you had a rancid piece of meat or spoiled grain, worms, larvae, mice, flies would spring into existence from this just spontaneously. Now, that has since been disproven by a number of tests, as we know today. So we have come a long way in the last 200 years. And a lot of these things we know better. We know how complex the cell is. We know that spontaneous generation does not occur. Yet abiogenesis is still held on to because there is no other option for an evolutionary theorist. And many of them would be very upset if you try to compare them to the same scientists that held to spontaneous generation, even though it's the same concept, with the same amount of proof behind it. And many people do believe in abiogenesis. Some studies say that as many as almost 73% believe that in some lab, life was created from non-life, that scientists, that humans have created simple life forms such as bacteria in a lab from nothing. Yet, if you actually look at the scientists, the people that are promoting a lot of this stuff, they know that this has an article of faith, as you can see there from the quote from Harold Urey, that it takes a lot of faith to think that life evolved from dead matter on this planet. There is no evidence for how life originated according to the evolutionary worldview. You have to have DNA, RNA, protein, plus a number of other numerous molecules, but those are the big three, all coming together at once, being functional at the same time, and then producing. This goes against a number of things that we see today. We see a number of natural processes that would prevent this. We see a ton of directly observable evidence to say that this would not occur. This is a universal, next to a law. It would probably be called a law, except the secular scientists, most of the people out there that support this, can't have that. And it just goes against plain common sense. The Miller-Urey experiment is probably most at fault for this idea, this inaccuracy. So we're going to go over that in a little bit. Now, the initial environment for this experiment required there be absolutely no oxygen. This experiment was trying to produce amino acids, and those are the building blocks of protein. So proteins are made up of amino acids. Yet, if there is no oxygen, that means there's no ozone layer. And with no ozone layer, then a lot of the ultraviolet radiation would penetrate and destroy the amino acids. Even today, sunlight is a great aseptic. It will destroy a number of viruses and fragile bacteria. Now, this was done in the late 50s, I believe, before the 1970s, because in the 1970s, the idea of what the primordial atmosphere was changed. Instead of being a high hydrogen and a low oxygen atmosphere, now it's high in methane and ammonia due to the volcanic gases being released. This alone would negate the Miller-Urey experiment, yet it's still held as a big shining beacon for the evolutionary model. So some try to say that it started in the oceans, but water is what we call a near universal solvent, meaning that it will dissolve almost anything. It does something called hydrolysis, and it will just destroy almost anything put in it after time, especially amino acids. And so you can see there are some quotes from scientific literature just saying that it's near impossible. Now for the results of the Urey experiment. 85% of the material that was produced was poisonous to life. So 85% of what was produced would go against anything that they're trying to produce. And they got about 1.9% that were truly amino acids. Now, amino acids have something called chirality, meaning that there is a left and a right-handed orientation of their mirror images. Now, life only uses the right hand for this kind of stuff. So that means all your amino acids are right-handed, same for your DNA. So that means that we have 0.01% of the targeted organic material, with 85% toxic. And even the other amino acids weren't great because it would have negated the function of the proteins. And there's over 300 different types of amino acids, but only 20 are used in life. So even if you negate all that, and you can still produce amino acids to produce a functional protein of 100 amino acids long, which that's very low. That's a very small protein. They can get up to 300 or 30,000 amino acids long. But to get 100 amino acids, that means that that protein to form has a 1 in 10 to the 130th power, meaning 10 with 130 zeros after it. And as I mentioned before, there's a mathematician called Emil Borel that basically says if it's over 1 to 10 to the 50th with 50 zeros, that's a universal probability boundary, meaning anything beyond that is impossible. So if you want some more information on that, feel free to look into Emil Borel. So we're not going to go into more detail in the Miller-Urey experiment because the evidence that they actually postulated then has been negated by their own scientists. And the math itself just doesn't match up, even with every leeway that you can give them. Yet still, biological textbooks mislead students into thinking that Miller actually succeeded. So if you have any more questions on that, let me know. But in short, there's not really much else to go into on this. And lastly today, we're going to be talking about information science, just because this seems to fit best here. And so information scientist, if you try to talk with somebody that is an evolutionist about this, most of the time they will say that this is just a creationist talking point. I've had that myself, but that's not the case. There are over 400 academic institutions, bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs in the US. In 2020 alone, over 18,000 degrees were given out in information science. And even Wikipedia, the master of all knowledge in our day and age, says that information theory is a scientific study. You can see a number of the other sciences that go into information science. This is truly a science. This is not just a creationist talking point. But as you'll see, they don't really have anything else to say about this because it is so just horrible from an evolutionary point of view. Now, redoing what a scientific law is, going over that again, is that something that has no known deviations. And there are a number of information science laws. These are: a material entity cannot generate a non-material entity, meaning that something that is made of matter cannot produce something that is not made of matter. Information is a non-material entity. Information is not made of matter. It may be transported in matter, like ink on a page, but the information is not the ink or the page. It is the words, which is a non-material. Information cannot be created by statistical processes, meaning that random chance cannot create information. And information can only be produced by an intelligent sender. Now, as far as information, think of that basically as a language. It has code, think of like letters, meaning, words. The word chair doesn't mean a chair, it represents a chair. It has expected action and an intended purpose, everything that language has. And that's what we see when we look at DNA, RNA, protein. There's actually called transcription and translation. So those people that first found it saw some of this in there. It is an information system by every definition. And the simplest organism has over 480 protein coding genes. That's about 580,000 letters. If SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, were to find this coming from the stars, they would conclude that this is an intelligent source and a language. Yet, because we see it here, we can't think that, evidently. But you can see down there just some of the codes, some of the sections of information inside our cell, inside the systems of our cell. It is a very in-depth, very complicated information system. So we know DNA is clearly defined or within the definition of information. So that concludes there must be a sender. And the DNA density, the complexity, is billions of times greater than today's technology, which means whoever sent it is smarter than we are. Hard to believe, but it's there. So the sender must have encoded all this into the DNA molecules, which means they had to have constructed the molecular biomachines that are all integrated with the DNA molecules and all the other features that were in the original life forms. So the sender must be very, very powerful and purposeful. And it must be non-material. The sender must be not made of matter. All right, how about now? We're good? All right. So, backing up a little bit, we know that because of information theory, that since non-material information comes from man, that means man ourselves must have a non-material component to us. We are not just matter. There we go. This also means that since information is in our universe, that the philosophy of materialism is false, because the philosophy of materialism says that there is nothing non-material in our universe, that the universe is solely composed of mass and energy. We know that's false. And then all theories of chemical and biological evolution require information to originate solely from a mass and energy alone. So basically, evolution requires it to originate from non-material. Because of the laws of information, we know that these are false because information cannot come from material. So we're looking at specifically with evolution in mind, neo-Darwinism. These laws of information negate that. So just to sum it up for you, these scientific natural laws of information prevent the evolutionary theory from being really utilized. Yet when we compare this to a biblical model, we know that the laws of information not only allow for it, but support it. So we know that information can only be produced by an intelligent sender. God spoke everything into existence, Genesis 1. God is all-knowing, so he's intelligent. Now we know that information is a non-material entity, and material entities cannot generate non-material entities, which God is a non-material entity. So he's spirit. We also know that God is a non-material process, and so he created all this genetic information, and when he spoke everything into existence because of these laws. And it wasn't by sheer chance. God's intelligence sent this. So these laws basically not only support it, but confirm it, almost certainty. Yet when we try to use this to talk with some people, those that are inherently against anything biblical, those that don't really want to know, will probably just start to deride or throw insults. And this happens very often. Just like I said before, they just say this is a creationist talking point and they try to ignore it because they have no other answer for this. This is incredibly useful for those that truly are trying to seek an answer. And that's where we're going to end today. This next section is going to be quite large. Next time, we're going to be going over the teleological argument. And a teleos means end or purpose. So this is basically like a design argument. So if you have any questions about all that, I know we went through some pretty deep stuff. Unfortunately, we could probably do an entire series on that alone, but this is just enough to get you started.